Hi, and welcome to the 8th Muse of the Introvert Biz Growth Podcast, the show where I talk to introverts who grow their business and make a difference. I'm Sarah Senecroce, your host, and I'm so happy to be back and recording these muses in 2019. Happy New Year, if I didn't have a chance to tell you that yet. If you're new here, then I want you to know that this is not the usual format of my regular episodes. I post a new show every other Friday, and it's always a conversation with a fellow introverted entrepreneur who uses his or her introverted superpowers to make a difference. These shows are edited by Tim, my professional podcast editor, who also creates amazing show notes pages. But today's episode is a muse. Unedited, raw content, no intro music, no bells and whistles. And I share these muses to make you think, to inspire you, to break the rules, and to eventually invite you to the gentle business revolution when it's ready. Today's muse is mainly a conversation with my friend Kat Rose from The Creative Introvert. She just published her first book, The Creative Introvert, How to Build a Business You Love on Your Terms. And I just finished it and highly recommend it, especially if you're in a creative business, which frankly, we all are. So Kat has been a guest on this show before on episode 6, so do check that one out too. But today I wanted to invite her back to talk about her new book. So here's Kat Rose. Kat, so good to talk to you.
Yes, and you.
You're down in Porto in Portugal. You just got there yesterday, you said, right?
Yeah. I'm attempting to escape the worst part of the British winter by jetting off to Porto, but it is nice.
What's the temperature right now?
It's probably not that hot. It's probably like, I haven't checked, but maybe like 14-ish degrees, but blue skies and that really nice wintry light, which I've loved. So if it just stays like this, I'll be very happy.
Yeah, and all we need is the sun, right? It doesn't have to be like tropical temperatures, but if you see the sun and blue sky, that makes a big difference already. Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for hooking up with me. Even you're in your Airbnb, but internet seems to be fine.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. So I want to congratulate you again on your book. I'm so, like I mentioned before offline, I'm still in awe of you, how you just wrote that book within, very short time and never mentioned anything to anybody. So
yeah, and I was saying how this is a bit of a habit of mine. And the reasoning, I think, is because if I start something and I announce to the world before I've done it, I just have that kind of pressure that, oh God, what if I don't finish it? What if I change my mind? And I'm very prone to changing my mind about things. So I think that was part of it. But funnily enough, same happened with The Creative Introvert as a blog. I remember having a friend say to me, "What, you've been blogging for how long? And I didn't know anything about this." And I think it's that possibly it's an introvert thing, but we like to kind of.
It's just kind of like avoiding the spotlight, right?
Yeah. Which isn't ideal. It was a bit of I probably should have been plugging the book a bit earlier, but there you have it.
Well, now you have all the time to talk about it. So
indeed.
I thought it was interesting that, you and I both at the same time kind of talked about these different P's, because in my anxiety-free marketing program, I based my module on the my program on the 7 P's of marketing, the traditional 7 P's, and I kind of revamped them and came up with my own P's. And then I open your book and you're like, oh, here's the 6P process. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that's so funny. And not all of the P's are the same. And I'll let you go over your piece, but it was interesting that, for example, people, we both talk about, and then you talk about, also the introverted superpowers and kind of knowing ourselves. And I think that's in the first P, I think prepare, right? And me, I actually created its own P, which I called personal power. So that's where we really go into, do the inner work and kind of know who we are and how we can serve our audience best is by going deep within and finding out who we are, right? So tell us about your 6Ps.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, that's really interesting about the process of, I mean, obviously there are only so many letters in the English language, and and as a coach, I think we all love letters that all start with the same letter. Anyway, yeah, I remember for a while, maybe it was like a couple of years ago, it was Phoebe Morochek from another podcast, the Unbecoming podcast, but she was sharing her process towards launching products online. And I think they were something like prepare, promote, and unpack. And that always really appealed to me. And so I kind of like expanded on that. I definitely like this idea of preparing, starting with like, okay, let's get our ducks in a row. And for me, prepare is to start with yourself. So that was this idea of, like you mentioned, going within, which for a start, I think appeals to introverts because we're naturally inclined towards introspection. And so I think, and just from like my own experience with the whole building an online business and all of that, not realizing from the get-go that it was actually the inner work that I needed most, especially at the beginning. I kind of realized that after the fact. So I just want to make sure that people come to that as soon as possible. And I really love all of that stuff. So talking about your mindset, you know, what are the current stories you're telling yourself? And no matter how long somebody's been in business, this is going to be really helpful, right? Because we're always telling ourselves stories, and sometimes we just need to remind ourselves they are just stories, and we can tell a new story. And then,
yeah, I want to just interject there and agree with you that even for myself, I now teach this stuff, but I wish somebody had told me before, got to do the inner work first, you know, that's really important. At the same time, I think it kind of is almost like a must to go through some of the stuff and, you know, market your business or put your art out there and maybe kind of see that it's not working.
That's so true. That's like
in
part
order
of the
to
journey.
be able to say, okay, this is not working, I need to change something. And that's when you go within and work, right?
It's almost like you get to a certain point, then you have to go back to number one because you've come against a roadblock, and that's what caused it. Right. Yeah. And there are other things like talking about your innate superpowers. So what are the strengths that are going to be really helpful on your journey? And talking about what you want. So again, this is something that I have to come back to even with myself regularly. Like, what is it exactly that you want? Because otherwise everything else that you do is going to be slightly off or really difficult to do. Because if you don't want something that much, you're probably not going to do it.
So funny. In my course, I have a topic that's called comparitis, because I don't know if it's an introvert thing or in general, we always compare ourselves, right? Yes. And what you just said reminded me of the fact that, yes, we need to first see if our definition of success is the same that someone else's definition of success, right? Yeah. If this person tells you, how I made $1 million with Facebook ads, well, maybe that's not how you define success. And so it's important to actually go within and see, well, what is success for you? I'm thinking, living a year on the road is pretty damn successful. So,
it's funny
definition of success.
And it's funny in how much that can change. So just because you wanted one thing one year doesn't mean you have to always just want that one thing. Yeah. Right. So then moving on to the second P, which is plan, which is possibly my favorite part, but I know not everyone loves planning as much as I do. So what I try to do, and I start this part with talking about the different approaches to planning, because I know that some people really hate the question, where do you see yourself in 5-10 years? And other people really love that. They love to kind of visualize the future. But then those people may not like to do the nitty-gritty day-by-day actions. So what I'm trying to do there is like come at it from those two different approaches. And I mean, this whole book, The Creative Introvert, is all about how can you shape your approach to your business to suit your own personality type and preferences. So that's how we're approaching planning.
I really liked it that you talked to all types of introverts, because clearly you're a thinking introvert,
Yes.
but you also addressed the intuitive introvert.
Yeah.
And especially in the planning phase, well, it's going to be different how an intuitive person plans versus a thinking person plans.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just talking about some of those things that might come up as an issue. So I think a lot of us run into that problem of, how do you make a difficult decision? Like, how do I know what is the thing that I'm going to be focusing on next? What's the next move towards this like long-term goal? So we talk about that. I also bring in the superfan concept in this part, and I know that you place that. So by superfan, I mean, who are the people in your audience, and not your entire audience. This is like your hardcore fans. There might be only a very small number of them, but they're the ones who are going to be like shouting about what you do from the rooftops and actually doing a lot of the promotion work for you without even asking. So you put that in a different P, am I right?
Yeah, I call it the ideal client, and for me that's the people P.
Yeah. And again, that's something that I came to a bit not too late, but I definitely struggled with that question, who is your ideal client, who is your ideal customer, from an early on place. And I'm hoping that with the guides that I'm giving there, it becomes easier for people.
Again, it's an advanced kind of strategy, because let's face it, if you just start out, and we both know that when we first started out, well, who's going to be picky about who you're going to work with, right? It's much harder to say, oh no, you're throwing $10,000 at me, but unfortunately you're not my ideal client. Nobody's going to do that when you first start out. Yes. And so that's why I often say, well, these are advanced marketing strategies or advanced business strategies, because clearly if you just open up shop, it's kind of more difficult to go with that.
100%. And like you said, you kind of need to, in a way, go through that. I mean, I talk a lot about experimenting, because I don't believe that just coming up with this ideal client or superfan in your head is going to make it like useful. It's only when you actually test out that idea and try to put that to the test that you can actually work that out.
Right.
So then we move on to produce, and this is a shorter part, but it's really just to do with, how do you actually do the work? We've got this wonderful plan, we know exactly who we're making things for, but that's not great when a lot of people, especially the creatives that I work with, we love to procrastinate. There's always another shiny object to distract us, and a lot of us like to do multiple things. I was just thinking about this morning. Like, there is nothing stopping me from, tomorrow morning to be like, you know what? I mean, and I did this last year. I decided to train as a yoga teacher just because, like, why not? That's another thing I like to do, which is fine. But it really is important that when you have got something to be working on, you're not totally derailed by other shiny objects. So that's a lot of that part. And then we move on to promote, and this is really the meat of the marketing end of it. So everything from, the starving artist mentality, and I don't think this is limited to like artists per se. I think this is a lot of just anyone who's creating something, and especially people who are, you want to be authentic. You want to, I think a lot of like healers and coaches and people who really want to do good in this world are kind of scared about that. Well, first of all, the money conversation, but also just it's almost like there's no honor in it if it comes too easy. If success comes too easy, it's like it's not honorable or something. It's a lot of like weird, old, almost romantic ideas that are embedded in again their stories, right?
Yeah. So that's the promotion part. That that's how my marketing program came together, the anxiety-free marketing program, because not just introverts, but on the program, funnily enough, there's probably 9 out of 10 are introverts. we have this anxiety when it comes to marketing. We don't want to be in the spotlight, and so you're right. Often it has also to do with money and our story with money, and it's almost like this similar feelings that people have towards money than they have towards marketing. They're both bad. Like, it's like, let's stay away from that. So it's interesting that you brought that up in this book as well.
Yeah. And it is funny. It's that thing like of, we want to be humble or something like that. And again, one of my favorite quotes, I think it's from Walt Disney, but I'm pretty sure. We don't make movies to make money. We make money to make more movies. And I love that because it's just a reminder that, if you're not making money, you're not going to be able to make your art. You're not going to be able to do these things or help these people. So anyway, that's a lot of that story. But also we talk about the tactical stuff. So content marketing, and also introducing yourself. Like I had somebody the other day comment on an Instagram post saying, "So what do you do?" I was like, "Oh, I get to practice my elevator pitch." And it was much easier now. I mean, but I remember thinking how horrible that question, I used to find that question, especially if I was like in person with somebody at a networking event, like Jesus, I couldn't stand it. But again, we talk about the different approaches to that, and about planning your promotional strategy. So I think taking the pressure off this idea that we have to have this, like everything guns blazing, all of the marketing avenues covered, especially if you're a one person band. You want to be able to focus in on like maybe your prime like outlet, your prime medium for your message, and then getting a plan together that's going to last you a good 6 weeks to 12 weeks. And then we move on to progress. So this is about keeping on. This is when it does get a bit hard. Like, you've gotten your initial blog post up or something, and you don't, have many people reading it. You feel like a little bit, I guess, disappointed with the results. But this is how do you keep on keeping on? And this is, I think, the bulk of what I've been focusing on for myself over the last couple of years. It's kind of like, okay, so you've had your initial fun. Now what? And it's making sure to keep making those podcasts every week and all of that. And we also talk about taking compliments, which can be challenging for people, but it's really important to acknowledge your wins, and taking criticism, because again, that's I don't know if you hear this a lot, but a common objection is, I don't want to put my stuff out there online because I'm scared of the haters. And we know that the internet is rife with the haters. So what do you do about that? So we talk about strategies for handling that too.
Again, that's another topic as well that I deal with. And I call it the rejection, fear of rejection, right? It's the same thing. And how do you deal with that? And where does it come from? So I want people to actually dig deep and find out, where does this come from? I know I have it. Let's find out. Is there something in my childhood that triggered that, or what is it? And then, like you say, how do you deal with it?
I would love to go further into that, like in particular. I mean, this is something that I didn't cover in the book, but I don't know if you've done much about EFT or tapping.
Yeah.
But I think that would be like a really helpful thing at this point. So I'm imagining somebody has identified that it was, a parent saying to them, actually, that wasn't very good. You're not good at this, whatever it is. And that feeling is going to stick with people. But using certain processes, like I think tapping, would be quite an interesting one to apply to that.
Yeah, exactly. I think there has been a study, can't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was also Brene Brown that mentioned that so many kids have been criticized at school, especially about their art or any kind of creative outcome, right? And so, those kind of experiences, they stick with you for the rest of your life. And so no wonder, we have the starving artist syndrome, because we've all been burned in school already. It's horrible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then we talk, so part 6, final part, is people. Saving the scariest to last. And we just basically with the message that introverts do need people too. So we're talking about networking, or not working, as I'd prefer to call it, accountability, asking, sending emails and pitching the press, as well as collaboration, mentors, mastermind. So these are all the things that, again, I started, at least like when I started freelancing, for sure, like this is just when I was doing web design. I assumed that this was perfect because I knew I was an introvert by this point, and thought I can just do all of this all on my own, never have to speak to anyone again, other than the odd client. But since then, realizing that actually there are all of these other kind of spokes to the wheel, and they're all really crucial parts. And even if I am having like a difficult time kind of doing the online stuff, I know that if I come back to doing the one-to-one connections, whether it is just sending an email or reaching out to a past client, or a friend of a friend, that's when things start to pick up. It's not going to be through an Instagram post. Right. So yeah, it's remembering that.
Yeah, I think it's so crucial. And I think that was probably my favorite chapter, because also that's what I needed to hear. And, it's like, same here. I mean, we have been in touch for a long time. We did some stuff together and even did some programs together. But still, it's not enough. I mean, we're in touch online with so many brilliant people, and yet we're all kind of doing our own thing in our own corner. So
yeah, and it's only when I have these conversations again with you or like somebody else, it's like, oh yeah, this is what I need. This is what I need in my day, and it is totally introvert friendly. So
exactly, yeah, and it's almost like, I'm sitting here in Switzerland and thinking, where is everyone? But if we would actually make the first step, yeah. I'm sure you wouldn't say no, right? If I sent out an email and say, hey, can you help me with something? I just need a pair of eyes to look at this. And yet, yeah, we don't do it often enough.
Yeah. And it was so refreshing when I started to realize that is more so the reality, especially online. You think, oh, it's all competitive, and, you go down that comparisonitis route. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But actually, people are really supportive, and the more you reach out to people, especially individually, the more you'll see that, and it's actually really bolstering then to kind of go back and then do the work on your own.
Yeah, I think what you just said though is really important, is reaching out individually, because clearly if you send out an email to your list, hey, then it feels, well,
it's impersonal. Yeah,
it's impersonal, so there's not the same weight to it as if you were sending an email, one-on-one, or even picking up the phone. Yeah.
No, and it's interesting you say that's your favorite chapter, because I'm thinking as well, it's probably the most important one, really. Like, I think initially I wrote this thinking everything is centered around part 4, which is all about promotion. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have the people part down, no, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting how, maybe also this past year, a lot of things have changed, maybe, and maybe you started to see that people is more important. So if you, write a second book, it's going to be more
all about people for introverts. Peopling.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I know we could keep on going, but I said I was going to keep it to 30 minutes. So let's stop here. I just want to really highly recommend Kat's book. You can find it all over Amazon, right?
Yeah. If you just search The Creative Introvert on Amazon, it should pop up.
The Creative Introvert. And also, it's really not just for artists, right? It's what I say, marketing, for example, is a creative process. So in the end, we're all creative somehow. So if you're marketing your business, you're a creative. And so, you should read this book. And it's really well written, and obviously the British humor is a nice touch. So highly recommended. Thanks so much for chatting with me, Kat.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure.
Have fun in Porto.
Thank you.
That was good, right? Again, go find the Creative Introvert book on Amazon or on Kat's website, thecreativeintrovert.com. That's it for today's episode. I wish you a wonderful week. Take care.